Fetto, and this is On Reflection, the beauty podcast with a global view on beauty, in association with Kate Somerville, clinically inspired expert skincare that visibly transforms skin with minimal downtime. Later in the show, I'm joined by Dr. Anjali Matto, one of the industry's most respected dermatologists. She'll be providing the answers to some of your most asked skincare questions. But first, required reading, where we discuss the beauty news and features that have piqued our interest. My guest today is Julie Wilson, the beauty director of US Cosmopolitan and former global beauty director of Essence magazine. Julie, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. The first piece that you chose is from Refinery 29, written by an ex-colleague of yours, Kimberly Seals-Allers, who used to be a senior editor at Essence. And she's also a founder of Earth, a new app coming up for Black and brown women to leave reviews of infant and maternity care. This piece is called The Black Maternity Mortality Crisis is Not for Sale. I mean, there is so much to unpack about this. We've read so much about the mortality rates of Black women being much higher than any other group due to essentially the systemic racism within the healthcare system. And that's something that is borne out on both sides of the Atlantic. What hasn't actually been talked about much is the issue around large corporations entering the Black maternal space under the guise of saving Black women. But essentially, they're capitalizing on something that's a huge crisis in the Black community. I want to know what it was about this piece that really piqued your interest.
I chose it because I'm pregnant. I am a mother of a 6-year-old son, Orion, who's amazing, but I'm also over 8 months pregnant. I'm a few weeks away from giving birth. So obviously it's on top of mind. It's something that I am not only interested in because I'm a journalist and I'm curious, but also because I'm right there about to give birth and thinking and worrying, honestly, about my health and the baby's health and what that means for me, especially in this time of COVID. It's kind of crazy that not only in a perfect world, the rate for Black women and infants, the mortality rate is so high, but in this now global pandemic, it's even more of an issue.
This is a conversation I was having with a friend just today who's like yourself, pregnant, and congratulations, by the way. She has been concerned about the same thing. And we have been having that conversation about the mortality rates of Black women and how we are treated within the healthcare system. And I think to myself, goodness me, this is not something that other women from other ethnic backgrounds really have to think about. And yet we have to think about that. We have to think about how we are going to be treated in those situations and what those outcomes are going to be. And we're having to do so much more than the next person in order to make sure that we have positive outcomes.
Look, it boils down to good old-fashioned racism, which we know is alive and well. And it also comes down to this perception of, we're strong. We are a strong community, Black women. We are fierce. We are determined. We are confident. We are magical. And I think part of those affirmations that we give each other, like Black girl magic and stuff, I think that plays into a lot of the reasons why the world and even the medical field feel like we can withstand certain treatment or pain. I remember Serena Williams talking about that when she went through her ordeal, having her daughter, and talking about the fact that just because I'm a strong, powerful Black woman who's a superior athlete doesn't mean that I don't go through as much pain as my, white counterparts. So there is this, again, good old-fashioned racism, and then there's this other perception that we're superhuman in a way that we don't feel pain like others.
Yes, the issue of Black pain, that's also been written about quite a lot, that we have different pain thresholds and therefore we don't deserve to have the same level of treatment as, say, our white counterparts. One of the things that this piece really placed a spotlight on is that now we're talking so much more about the racial injustices since everything happened this summer and this year. So a lot of corporations are getting involved in this conversation. But even though they are saying that the Black maternal mortality issue is at the top of their mind, essentially it's driven by corporate interests. So I know there are a lot of people who probably say, well, at least the big corporations are doing something and they're trying to help. But what this piece really highlighted is the way they are trying to help. You know, we all understand the capitalist element of business. That's what makes the world go round. We understand that. But the issue this touches on is that rather than partnering, supporting, or funding many of the community-led solutions out there, what a lot of these corporations are deciding to do is use their financial resources and corporate heft, as it were, to create their own commercial ventures. So essentially, it's not really helping the situation. It's basically replicating the same systems of oppression that have already existed.
Exactly. It's all about making money. Capitalism, capitalism, capitalism. But now with the racial unrest brewing again, let's be honest, Black Lives Matter movement has been going on for centuries. But there are corporations and organizations like Black Mamas Matter Alliance, all of those that were mentioned in the piece that have been doing the work and are doing the work really well. And so when you have big corporations that are trying to come in and kind of take that space, or occupy it in some way, you know, it's like, why don't you just use your good and your power and your money to pour into these organizations that are already doing the work and are already led by strong Black women who understand the issue, who have gone through this issue, and who know how to make the type of strides and solutions that are necessary in making a change, rather than being performative and saying, well, look, we're a big corporation, we're going to do this on our own and like be fancy and get this woke stamp of approval. It's not about that. We have to put that performative aspect and drive aside. And corporations really need to start thinking about how can they make the biggest change. And like you said, in this piece, the argument is to make the most effective change is to pour into these organizations and to these Black women that have been doing the work already.
Totally. I mean, I love what she says here, you know, that saying, nothing for us without us, rather than them trying to set up something new. They should be, like you were saying, funding systems that already exist rather than marginalizing all the community efforts. I love what the writer said. It's like a type of corporate takeover of Black people. It really struck me because I find that you have corporations doing that in this space, but they do it in so many different spaces. Within the beauty space, that happens all the time. There are brands who are creating products for Afro hair, and yet there's no one on the team or behind the scenes that looks like me. And for me, I look at that and I think, well, you're not really trying to find a solution because you're not trying to make me part of that solution. It's just exploitation.
Right. And they're often riddled with ingredients or chemicals that are harmful to our health. This piece also touches upon that with the whole Johnson & Johnson powder situation and how there was cancer-causing ingredients in that for years and the lawsuit that resulted in it. And so when you have people that are creating products that aren't a part of that community or have no connection to that part of that community, they're not necessarily taking everything into account and making sure that everything is so thoughtful and healthy for us.
Absolutely. I think she sums up the piece brilliantly when she said, Black-led solutions are welcome from deep-pocketed corporations and well-resourced businesses. Gentrifiers and colonizers are not. I think that really sums up exactly the point she's trying to make.
Absolutely.
So I loved your piece, What Everyone Can Learn from Black Women About Beauty. This was in this month's Cosmo. It was so expressive. I could hear your voice and your personality in it. It was so jaunty and so joyous. It was just wonderful. I don't know if I've read a piece like that, weirdly enough. It feels like a really obvious thing that we should be talking about, but I don't know if I've read anything like it.
I feel like I've been thinking about how Black women interact with beauty for such a long time. I mean, like as Black women, as you know, in the beauty industry, we talk about this stuff amongst ourselves, but I had never seen a mainstream publication and one as iconic as Cosmo really address it and put it out there in the world. And so this was truly a labor of love. And I'm so glad that our editor-in-chief, Jessica Pels, was so behind it and was so excited about me writing it. I had a conversation years ago when Allure magazine decided to stop using the word anti-aging in their content, which was a powerful statement. And I had a friend that was working there, and he said to me, he said, oh, Essence should join the bandwagon. We should all just stop using anti-aging. And I was like, I don't know when the last time I typed anti-aging. Like, Black women don't stress about that like you guys do. Like, we're not calling each other up like, girl, these wrinkles and da da da. That's not our jam. Like, we are all about enhancing our beauty, not transforming it. And we have this reverence for age that is so insanely magical to me. And in the piece, I say, look, when you ask a Black woman who their beauty muses are, they're often say people who are twice their age, like Diana Ross and Diane Carroll and Tracy Ellis Ross, Kerry Washington, whatever it is, women who are older than them, right? We don't have this fixation on youth and like looking like we just came out of the womb. You never hear white women say like their beauty muses are Helen Mirren or Meryl Streep or Goldie Hawn. Those women are all beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's all about youth, 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 looking as young as possible. And we are all about growing into our age gracefully and beautifully. And so I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about how we complement each other. Black women, we will be strangers on the street and be like, sis, what is that lipstick color you're wearing? Like,
Listen, I love that because I read that and I was just like, that is me all over on public transport, in the street. I run down people to say, I love your braids. Tell me, where did you get your braids done? Or where is that lipstick from? Or whatever. And we do that a lot. And I know a lot of my white friends think that that's really quite strange. And I'm like, no, no, no. This is something we do. We do it all the time. We see girls, see other women, and we compliment them and say, gosh, your hair looks amazing, or you look amazing. It's just something we do, right?
All the time. It's our love language to each other. You don't see other white women give the head nod when you're walking down the street. Like, when you see another Black woman, whether you're obsessed with her beauty or her outfit or whatever, we always like acknowledge each other. Black people like acknowledge each other in the world. But then when you add the beauty element on top of that, it's a language of love that we share. It's like we have our own social media network. I don't have to know who you are, where you come from, where you went to school, what you do for a living. I just want to know, sis, where did you get your braids done? A beautiful friendship could even blossom from that. So I thought that these ways in which we interact with beauty, they're ours and they're ours alone. But I do think that the world can be inspired by them because I think we do it right. And I think we do it in a really amazing way.
I want to go back to the point you made about aging, and I completely agree with you. There is a preoccupation with youth that is not such a thing in the Black culture because we have a reverence also for age and the wisdom that comes with age and so on. However, I do think that certainly within this industry, there is that pressure of youth. You know, we work, I believe, in an incredibly ageist industry where you have to be really intentional about not getting caught up in that. People here are getting more and more obsessed with treatments and injectables. And it's becoming even a thing within the Black community, you know, lots of different age groups. And I just wondered whether that's something that you're starting to see on that side of the Atlantic.
I definitely think so. I say all of that, like reverence for age and all of that, to say, look, we're not a monolith. And it's no poo-poo against Black women who get treatments or get surgery or that sort of thing. I just think that there is, again, this is sweeping generalization, but a difference sometimes in our entry point to that, in our reasoning for it. Obviously, we want to look our best, but I do feel from the conversations I've had and from the interaction I've had with so many Black women that we do feel this sense of wanting to just enhance our beauty and not transform ourselves, not be someone we're not. Of course, there are those people who feel a need to change, but I do feel it's very much like, I just want to look like my best possible self, not someone else.
There's a wonderful line that you ended on where you said the power of celebrating your overall dopeness might just be the biggest beauty secret there is out there. And I just love that. I thought that was wonderful.
You know, my word is dope. So like, I try to like create a dope life and a dope spirit. And like you said, ageism is real and aging is real. And I'm a 38-year-old woman in the beauty industry that, again, like you said, is obsessed with youth. And for me, I celebrate every year so much. And I don't want to hide the fact that I'm knocking on 40's door, even though that might not necessarily be something that's super attractive to my industry or to my profession. But I feel like as long as I lead with my dope spirit and light, that people can see past whatever perceptions they have of what a 38-year-old woman should be and just see me and see my spirit. And that will be enough.
Amen to that. Now let's go on to our final piece. Pharrell, he's just launched his beauty brand. I don't know, have you tried it yet?
I literally got it yesterday in the mail.
I wasn't surprised when I heard it because he's always talked about his obsession with skin health and he's always looked 12 and we've always been obsessed about his skin. We hear a lot about celebrity beauty brands and celebrities launching products. And for me, this seems kind of different. It feels authentic. And also he's done this in collaboration with his longtime dermatologist, Dr. Elena Jones.
Look, sis, it's genius. We've been waiting for this. Over the years, there's been so many stories about like, look at Pharrell when he first entered the scene and look at him now, like they're the same picture. Like you can't tell which is the like throwback and what is now. He's clearly a vampire. And we've all wanted to know the secret. Could he possibly be drinking the blood of small children? What is he doing? So the fact that he is now giving us the secret behind all of that and doing it in a really beautiful way and responsibly and sustainably and all of those things is really great. Like I said, I got the products. I have not tried them yet because it's only been 24 hours, but I'm really excited. And I think that, like you said, there's celebrities moving into the beauty space where it makes sense or where it doesn't. And I think for him, this really makes sense. The fact that it's unisex is really great. I think it's going to do really well. And, you know, now in the time that we're in, people are leaning into their skincare and like, I'm not going out, I'm wearing a mask all the time. Like, let me like actually get my skin into formation. And he's giving us some of his tools. And I can't wait to get my vampire Pharrell look on.
I'm pretty excited about it. I actually think this is one of those celebrity, and I hate to use that term, but a skincare brand or a beauty brand that's been launched by a famous face, as it were, that I really believe is pretty authentic and will do really well. And what's been very clever about it, yes, it's sustainable, it's vegan and so on, but there are 3 products, right? There's the cleanser, that's the exfoliator, and there's the moisturizer. And it's all about the formulations. And I think it's tapping into that whole thing of you don't need to use 1,000,001 products in order to get good skin. I mean, I have to say, I think Pharrell does have really good genes anyway. There's that working in his favor, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's obviously genetic, but if there's anything that we can do to possibly get to his level, thank you. And he has now provided us with that. You know, the jury is still out. Like you said, it's brand new. We'll see how people react to it. But I think it is something that people have been waiting for and just makes sense for him because people have been so obsessed with his skin and so obsessed with the fact that he just looks great and he radiates. I also think that that's just like a part of his spirit and his soul and his light. So use the products, use the new Pharrell products and be a good person. And then perhaps you'll look like Pharrell.
Julie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan. I love how you think, your mind, and your work. And so it's such a pleasure to finally chat with you.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much, Julie. It's now time for In Praise Of. This is a section of the show where we laud the merits of a single beauty product. This week, it's Kate Somerville's Goat Milk Cleanser. Recently, I took a look at my beauty stash and I found the majority were actually modern day polymaths, i.e. they kind of do a bit of everything, particularly my cleansers. They didn't just clean, they doubled up as resurfacing masks, as blemish treatments, as brighteners, as housekeepers. You see my point? They did absolutely everything. And that's not actually a terrible thing when it works. But I do have moments where I wonder whether multitasking is a little bit overrated. Sometimes you just want to revel in something that does that one key thing it's supposed to do and does that one key thing absolutely brilliantly. For me, Kate Somerville's Goat Milk Cleanser is exactly that. Many people have their own ideas of what a good cleanser is. They think it's a cleanser that gets your skin so squeaky clean that it feels tight. That, my friends, is not a cleanser. That's a paint stripper. And your poor old out-of-sync irritated skin is not thanking you for it. What this creamy, comforting and super moisturizing cleanser does is exactly what a great cleanser should do. So it removes impurities, it removes excess oil, and it removes makeup without stripping the skin of moisture or of life. Still, I can see why other people actually get it wrong. That fine balance of cleansing without stripping is not actually as easy as you think, but this manages to do it because it's got a great formula. So there's Manuka honey to nourish the skin, polypeptides to reduce skin inflammation and restore your skin barrier, and of course the goat's milk, which soothes and moisturizes dry and damaged skin. Now I'll be honest, the idea of Cleopatra bathing in goat's milk used to make me shudder, but after seeing what this cleanser does, I'll happily swim in the stuff. My guest on today's Talking Points is Dr. Anjali Mato. She's a brilliant consultant dermatologist and the author of Skincare Bible, The No-Nonsense Guide to Great Skin. She's here today to answer some of the most asked questions on skincare. Dr. Anjali, welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much for coming on. So we have quite a few questions to get through, so I will crack on.
Sure.
What are the best treatments for dark spots and hyperpigmentation?
Yeah, this is a really common question. And I'm obviously going to start with my medical hat and say it does matter what the cause of that underlying pigmentation is. So are we talking about freckles and sunspots? Are we talking about a skin condition called melasma? Or are we talking about post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation? So whilst the treatment options are broadly the same, it is important to know exactly what the underlying issue is. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do. I think when people first notice kind of uneven skin tone or dark spots on the skin, the first thing you're probably going to do is go to the shops and look for skincare and over-the-counter products that can help lighten those areas. And I think there's a number of skincare ingredients that can be useful for that. So things like tranexamic acid, kojic acid, azelaic acid, tretinoin, all of which are readily available. But if you find that you've been using products like this for, say 6-12 weeks and you're still seeing no benefit, it might be a sign that actually you do need a little bit of professional help, be that with things like chemical peels or laser treatments or, slightly stronger acid-based products that could be done in a medical setting like glycolic acid, lactic acid, mandelic acid.
I guess it's key that everyone who uses any of these kind of products must always ensure they use a sunscreen as well.
Absolutely, because a lot of these products work effectively by exfoliating the upper layers of the skin. So that does leave the upper layers more vulnerable to damage from ultraviolet light. So using a sunscreen every day is an absolute must.
Quite recently, I've been having a lot of conversations around skip care, essentially the opposite of the 10-step, the 13-step, the 15-step. Everyone's talking about minimizing their skincare regimes. But within that, what are the products or perhaps the ingredients that everyone should have in their skincare routine?
Yeah, I think we are actually moving away, aren't we, from this kind of multi-layer kind of skincare routine as we're thinking more about sustainability and the environment and wasting less. And I think that this is definitely a good step because I think the more products we use, the more variables we put into a treatment plan, the higher the risk of causing irritation and sensitivity. So the basic backbones of a good skincare routine, we should all be cleansing morning and evening. It sounds a bit humble, but, it is important that we remove the dirt, the sweat, the grime, the pollution, the makeup, the sunscreen that we've got on our skin during the day. We should all really be looking to wear a sunscreen every day, partly to reduce the risk of further skin cancers in the future, partly to reduce skin aging if that's a concern. And then I think when we get to sort of our mid to late 20s onwards, most of us can also benefit from a vitamin A or a retinoid product at nighttime in our routine.
And how often should one exfoliate? And what sort of exfoliation should one go for? Normally, I wouldn't even ask that because I never recommend any kind of scrub. I always recommend an acid exfoliator, but I do know that there are some exfoliators out there that are slightly grainy and maybe are not so detrimental to the skin. But I personally prefer an acid-based exfoliator. What's the main difference between the two? And should you choose a specific type of exfoliator based on your skin?
Yeah, I think this is a good question, actually. I think there's a lot of confusion about exfoliation in general, and its end purpose really is to remove that upper layer of dead skin cells, the idea being to leave a kind of brighter, more glowing complexion behind. And when we think about exfoliation, there are two methods this could be done by. So physical exfoliation, like your scrubs, your cleansing devices, or chemical exfoliation, which uses acids like alpha and beta hydroxy acid, so your glycolics, your lactics, your mandelics, your salicylic acid, to basically achieve the same end. And I have to be honest, my personal preference is also the same as yours. I do prefer chemical exfoliation. I think the risk with physical exfoliation, so anything mechanical rubbing against the skin, is there is sometimes a tendency to want to rub and scrub too hard, which I think can lead to injury, sensitivity, and irritation of the skin. With regards to how often it should be done, it does vary from skin to skin type. People that have got very dry skin, very sensitive skin, or mature or postmenopausal skin probably find that their skin does not need to be regularly exfoliated, maybe more than once or twice a month, if that. On the other hand, if your skin is quite oily, it's quite blemish prone, it's quite resilient, you might find that you can actually exfoliate more frequently like that. And a gentle exfoliator several times a week might be something that you manage. So it does depend on the individual, but it also depends, I think, on the exfoliating method that you're using. So when we think about acid exfoliators, it makes a big difference on the concentration of that acid that's being used, the formulation of that acid, whether it's a leave-on product like a toner versus a rinse-off product like a face wash. So there's lots of things to take into account. But I think general rule of thumb, if your skin is getting dry, sensitive, irritated, chances are you're over exfoliating, you need to back off. On the other hand, if your skin seems to be tolerating it fine, you're probably okay.
There is one question I have here about acne. And I think a lot of times when people think about acne, they think about teenage skin, they think about younger skin. But I'm finding that a lot of women who are way past that time of their lives are now dealing with acne. What is the best way to deal with that?
Yeah, adult acne is becoming so much more common than it used to be sort of a few decades ago. And we don't 100% know the reason why we're seeing so much of it. In terms of treating it, generally what I would say is, adult acne in females falls into the category of developing acne often for the first time after the age of about 23, 24. It often shows a predilection for the lower part of the face. So the cheeks, the lower cheeks, the chin, the jawline, the upper neck. And it also seems to flare with one's menstrual cycles. So people will find their skin is worse in the run up to their periods. So tackling it can be quite tricky. And in terms of kind of basic things to start with, make sure that you're using skincare that contains ingredients like salicylic acid, like benzoyl peroxide, niacinamide, tea tree oil, and vitamin A. But if you've been doing that for a while and you still find that you're getting very deep, very painful spots, cystic spots that last weeks and weeks and weeks, it might be a sign actually that you do need some medical intervention from either a GP or a dermatologist, and prescription creams. So prescription retinoids, prescription benzoyl peroxide, prescription combinations that contain antibiotics. And then failing that, there are oral medications that we can also use. So there's a number of things that can be done, but it does depend on the extent, the severity, but also whether or not it's starting to affect your mental health and how you feel about your skin and your confidence.
I mentioned the whole issue around skip care. A lot of people now are saying you only need maybe 3 products and that's what everybody needs. But I don't know about that. I'm not sure that that works necessarily for every single person. And perhaps also it's down to the formulations of the products that we're talking about.
I think one of the reasons why we're seeing people taking a step back from their skincare actually is because information is so freely accessible now. And I think one of the things that happens then is you do a little bit of reading and you think, oh, I need niacinamide. Oh, I need an alpha hydroxy acid. Oh, I need a bit of this. I need a bit of that. And before you know it, this routine contains 10 different products with 10 different ingredients, all of which can be quite strong and quite active and can cause irritation and sensitivity. So I think what we need to do is be a little bit smarter with our choices, because there are certain ingredients that will have multi-purpose functions or benefits. So vitamin A is a good example of this. So vitamin A can be used for treating uneven skin tone or pigmentation. but it's also beneficial for acne-prone skin or congestion, but it's also beneficial for anti-aging. So you may not need 3 different things to target those issues if that's what your end goal is. Similarly, I think that there are products on the market that also offer kind of multifunctional benefits. So few products that will combine, for example, vitamin A and an alpha hydroxy acid. So rather than use 2 separate things, you could use one. So I think there are a number of things, but I think part of it is being driven by simply the wealth of information that we have at our fingertips, which makes it quite confusing to know, well, actually, which ones do I need and which ones can I go without?
Everyone always asks, okay, so if I use a niacinamide, can I use a retinol with that? If I use a vitamin C, can I use an acid with that? And people are getting really, really super confused. If there are key things to remember in terms of ingredients that cannot be used together, what are they?
So this is an interesting one, actually, because I've often seen kind of comments being made of like, oh, for example, don't use an alpha hydroxy acid and a retinol together. And there isn't any reason why they can't be used together. But the reason why kind of generically that advice is given is because it can increase the risk of irritation and sensitivity, because any product that you apply to the skin that can exfoliate, if you put anything on top of the skin, that will then penetrate further and deeper and create those issues. So I think that we do get too bogged down in the don't use your niacinamide and your vitamin C at the same time. I think ultimately the question I would ask is, why do you need to be using all of those products in the first place?
That's a good point. A friend of mine, actually, who's French, I remember her talking to me about skincare issues and saying how different our approach is here in the UK, that in France, a lot of mothers will take their young daughters to dermatologists. They start their relationship early, and it's a very different approach. I thought that was quite interesting. We don't really have that culture around skincare here.
That's absolutely right, actually. And it's the same when, if you go to Central Europe, it's like the French pharmacy kind of style of product where everybody, is easily available to get these kind of products that you need to start a skincare routine early. The second thing is, I think you're right, there is a massive shortage of dermatologists by number in the UK. So people don't have that kind of relationship where they will go to somebody for their skincare advice, but also get their moles checked once a year. So it's not purely with skincare. I think it also filters down into some of the more serious aspects of kind of skin cancer screening and mole checks as well, where we just do not have the same attitude in this country.
And I guess there is an element of the financial aspect of it. Not everyone has that in their budget. They can't necessarily afford to go and see a dermatologist. So maybe that's also playing a part.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you look at, even starting prices for private consultations for dermatology, it's not cheap. But what I would say as far as skincare goes is you don't necessarily always need someone like a consultant dermatologist. There are some fantastic facialists and estheticians and cosmetic doctors out there as well that are able to give the skincare kind of advice. So hopefully there is kind of a budget that will suit everyone without having to pay kind of very, very top level prices.
A lot of people think they have to go and spend huge amounts of money with the top dermatologists in the country or whatever. And I say to them, you know what, just start with a facialist, start with a good facial and see where you get to from there. Facials have transformed my skin. They really, really have. And I see the difference when I go months without having a really good facial or no facial at all. It makes such a huge difference to how my skin works. It's something that I always advise. Okay, so laser treatments and dark skin. There's a lot of confusion around this. I'd love you to clear it up.
Yes, so I think the issue here is that people are always blanketly told that if you have skin of colour, then you need to be really wary of any form of laser treatments. The actual fact is that if you do have skin of colour, that doesn't mean that laser treatments are unsafe. The issue actually comes down to the fact that doing laser treatments on skin of colour, there is a higher risk of complications such as worsening of pigmentation. However, if you go to practitioners that are experienced in treating that skin type and have experience with the machines that they use, there is no reason why those treatments aren't possible. The difficulty is trying to find who knows what they're doing with the machine. And, there is a great deal of variability on how 2 different people might use the same laser machine and the energy settings they might use and the number of passes over someone's skin they might do. So the best way that I describe it is, You could give me a paintbrush and some paints, and you could give Picasso a paintbrush and some paints. And despite us having the same tools, what we would paint would be completely different. And I think the same goes for laser treatments and the practitioner that's performing them. So practitioner choice is really important.
And then dark circles under eyes.
Dark circles is probably one of the most common things I get asked about as well. And it really does upset people because it makes people look tired or sad or even hungover when they're none of the above. But what I am going to say is that usually the reason why one gets dark circles is multifactorial. It's never one single thing that is the cause. So it is important, first of all, to try and figure out what is going on with the anatomy and the physiology around the eye area before you come up with a treatment plan. Is this genetic? Is this due to somebody's ethnic background where skin of color does suffer with dark circles much more? Is it due to an underlying medical condition? Is there eczema around the eye? Is there some kind of contact allergy around the eye? Is it due to someone's lifestyle factors? You're not getting enough sleep? Is it someone smoking? Are they drinking a lot of alcohol? Or is it simply related to age-related changes which happen to all of us, where the skin around the eyelids starts to get thinner? We start to lose fat underneath the eye. So we start to get kind of a depression known as a tear trough. So we need to try and figure out which one of those causes or which number of those causes are what the underlying issue is. And then in terms of actual treatments, you can use topical agents. So you can use things like vitamin C, azelaic acid, kojic acid, niacinamide, soy. They're the ones that are often found in over-the-counter stuff. And then prescription agents that contain hydroquinone used in short, sharp bursts, alpha hydroxy acids or tretinoin under the guidance of a doctor can work. You can use chemical peeling agents underneath the eye. So low percentages of trichloroacetic acid, lactic acid can also help fade the area if it's simply discoloration. You can use lasers around the area as well. So things like a Q-switch Ruby or an Alex laser. And then if the issue is due to kind of loss of volume or fat underneath the eye, you can also inject fillers in that area as well. So there are a large number of options available, but it does depend on what that cause of that dark circle is first.
So I have two questions here. You mentioned hydroquinone. I would love you to sort of unpack that a little bit. Yeah. It's one ingredient that people immediately connected with skin bleaching.
Enlightening. Yes, absolutely. So hydroquinone, for those that aren't familiar, is an agent that lightens the skin that is often found in skin bleaching agents. And skin bleaching or skin lightening is common in a number of communities of skin of color. It is also sadly available quite easily, illegally, in parts of the UK as well. Now, hydroquinone itself is a safe agent provided it is used for the right reason, for the right duration of time. So there's a big difference between using hydroquinone to completely change the color of your skin, which clearly, ethically is completely inappropriate, versus using hydroquinone to a small localized patch of skin that may have a little bit of post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation or may just be a localized dark patch, for example, underneath the eye. The issue with hydroquinone is that it's usually mixed in with other skin lightening agents, and it can lead to other health problems. So that's one of the reasons why it does get a bit of bad press. But dermatologists have been using prescription hydroquinone in a controlled fashion for decades. So I think the key here is, as long as it's given by a professional and you are given very clear instructions of how to use it, when to use it, where to use it, but also that it's not used for prolonged periods of time. One of the issues with prolonged hydroquinone use is it can cause something called ochronosis. And ochronosis is almost a reverse increased pigmentation you can get, where you get this kind of bluey gray kind of slate colored deposition in the skin. So one needs to be careful with hydroquinone, and it does need to be used in a controlled fashion.
And then my other question around dark circles, how far can you actually eradicate them if it's genetic?
Yeah, so the answer there probably is you probably can't. I think it's unrealistic to think that if this is part of your DNA and your makeup that you will permanently get rid of it. You probably won't. There might be things that create a percentage improvement, such as the things that we talked about, but to think that they will disappear with a treatment, they'll never come back, is probably very, very unlikely. I mean, the second thing as well, actually, with regards to pigmentation around the eye and any other parts of the body, actually, is that sunscreen aspect as well, in terms of prevention and stopping it get any worse. And the one thing I probably should say, actually, particularly with skin of color, when we're talking about pigmentation, it is very important that skin of color chooses a sunscreen that has got iron oxide in it, because iron oxide is probably one of the only filters that will block out visible light as well as ultraviolet radiation that can lead to pigmentation in the darker skin types.
Does that affect whether you're left with a white cast?
Iron oxide is tinted rather than white. So most iron oxide containing sunscreens actually have a tint to them. So they shouldn't be leaving that whitish or greyish sheen that you talk about.
We're talking about sunscreen. And one of the questions here is, do I need to wear sunscreen when I'm indoors?
Yes, I've been asked this a lot in clinic as well recently. So the answer here is the purpose of sunscreen is to protect against ultraviolet radiation and, to a lesser degree, visible light and infrared light from the sun. Now, if you are inside and you are not working anywhere near a window, you do not need protection against those things. So you do not need sunscreen indoors. On the other hand, if you are sitting and working by a window all day, ultraviolet A light, which is still around in the winter months, can penetrate window glass. But if you're literally inside, you're not going out, you're not seeing any sunshine, you do not need to. I know there's been this whole thing about but you should wear your sunscreen to protect against blue light from your computer screens. The blue light that is emitted from our computer screens is so low in concentration compared to what we would get from sunlight that it's not something that we need to be concerned about.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anjali. That's been wonderfully insightful. Hopefully it'll lead us all down the road to better skin. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And that's it for this week. Please do visit us on orbpodcast.com for links to all the articles we discussed. And if you haven't done so already, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter. My thanks to Julie Wilson, Dr. Anjali, this week's brand partner Kate Somerville, and to you for listening to On Reflection.